Hi, my name is Larry Baldridge, golf instructor at the Mitchell Golf Performance School. Today we're going to talk about how to best use the Mitchell golf equipment. Now I want to introduce you to our bench motor that we utilize for cutting shafts and abrading tips or prepping tips of shafts. All right, so what I have now is one of the shafts that I pulled earlier, which is a graphite shaft. And when you pull these, it's left with a lot of old epoxy residue that we need to clean off if we're going to reuse and install this shaft. All right, so when I want to prep this shaft, I'm going to put the shaft onto the guide here, and I'm going to engage with the belt, constantly turning towards me to clean off any old epoxy or residue. All right, so you can turn the machine off, and you can see that I've cleaned off all of the old epoxy and have prepped that for a new reinstall. All right, so after abrading and cleaning up the tip of the shaft, the next thing on a pulled shaft we need to do is drill out the center hole here for reinstall. What I use to drill out shafts are these rubber vise pads. They go into your vise so that they can hold the shaft securely without any damage. All right, so to drill the inside, which is all filled up with old epoxy, I want to use a drill gun and preferably a 1/8 drill bit. Next, I want to align the drill bit as straight as possible with the shaft and start to drill. Once you've drilled all the way through, your shaft is now ready for install. Now that we've prepped the shaft, next thing we want to do is prep the head. In order to do that, I still use the rubber vise pads, and I secure the head into the vise so that it frees up my hands to be able to drill out any old epoxy inside the hosel. When cleaning out the hosel, I first use a drill bit that fits just inside the inside diameter. And what I want to do here is drill out to the bottom any old residue or epoxy. Then after we've used the drill bit, we're going to use a wire brush. What this will do is scrape any of the old residue inside on the inner walls. After drilling out with the hosel brush, go ahead and examine the inside of the hosel to make sure that all of the old residue is completely removed. Next, what I'm going to look for is choosing a proper ferrule. Mitchell, we make a great ferrule kit that has an array of different lengths and sizes that can fit irons, fairway woods, drivers, you pretty much name it. The ferrule that was on this club, if I want to match that, try to get the one that you cut off to match for the new one. So for this particular model, it requires a 335 inside diameter ferrule, and I'm going to actually choose a 1/2 inch for the height. And what I like to do is just put those up against the hosel, any ferrule, to see what it looks like before I install. Okay, so we have a basic install here on a fairway wood. We've prepped our shaft, we've prepped our head, we've picked out our ferrule. Now what we want to do is mix up some epoxy and apply into the hosel so that we can install the shaft. When applying epoxy, I want to pull out about a nickel size for one club. We want to take about 20 seconds, 30 seconds at most on mixing this epoxy thoroughly. If you don't have a good mix, you will not have a good bond, and over time, the head will come loose. All right, so once I've got my epoxy mixed up, I'm going to use a good amount, about half of what's on your board there, to apply inside the hosel. Make sure that you really coat the inside walls of all hosels. All right, now that I've applied enough epoxy inside the hosel. Next, I want to apply a little bit on the outside of the shaft. There's a number of ways of doing this, but I just simply roll a little bit of that tip of the shaft into the epoxy. Now I'm ready to install my ferrule. The epoxy on the shaft also allows the ferrule to slide up pretty easily as opposed to being dry. Sometimes you can get the ferrule stuck when you don't want to. So that's one reason why I like putting the epoxy on the shaft. Next, when I'm ready to insert the shaft into the head, I'll allow the depth of that hosel to determine how far up my ferrule goes. Next, what we want to do is clean up any epoxy on the outside of the hosel or ferrule and really make sure that you're nice and clean here so you don't have to do it after this all dries. Now that everything is clean, what I would like to do is make sure that the shaft alignment is proper. So lining up any logos to the bottom or top half of the shaft. Then ideally, we want to put to rest in a vertical position. All right, so when we're getting ready to turn a ferrule, there's a different style belt you need to use for that with our bench motor here. Right now, I have a sandpaper belt on. It's an 80 grit, great for plastic and certainly steel. If you want to turn on that. When I've switched this out, you want to loosen the knob, push down on the housing here. It's a spring load, so that'll allow you to remove one belt to replace with another. Now this is the red Egyptian cloth belt, so it's only used for ferrules. So what I like to do is put this up on top of this upper wheel here, push down and get the bottom portion of the belt on the lower wheel, and that allows me to get the belt installed. So when ready to turn a ferrule, the thing to look for, like right now, this brand new ferrule has a little bit of an overhang to it in comparison to the hosel. So we want to turn that down and make that flush so that it finishes off and looks nice for the golfer. All right, so the idea here is that when we engage with the belt to turn down the ferrule properly, we want to actually turn the ferrule and the head towards your body as opposed to being turned away from the body. Okay, the proper technique is turning towards. So practice this before you turn on if you are new to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the motor. I'm going to show you how to properly turn a ferrule and what steps after to finish off. All right, after I've turned the ferrule on the belt, we want to just double check to make sure that I removed any of that overhang. Next, after finishing turning the ferrule down, we're going to shine the ferrule up using acetone and a piece of paper towel. When we're soaking the paper towel, make sure you use a lot of acetone. The next thing we're going to do is pinch very lightly and turn the ferrule inside the wet paper towel. I like to fold up the paper towel again and just press lightly all the way around to make sure that the ferrule is smooth and shiny. And if you like these videos, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and like us on Facebook.